All right. I'm here with Sojourner Truth's Ain't I a Woman? And this is your first homework assignment to annotate this document. And then I'm going to ask you to write some observations that you have as well. So I'm just going to, if you're feeling unfamiliar or uncomfortable with this assignment, I will show you how I would approach it. I'll be reading just the first paragraph, maybe to help you get started, and then you'll do the rest all on your own. So I'm here with Apple Pages. I have opened the PDF. I downloaded some app called PDF to Pages, so I can take all the PDFs and open them in Pages. And this is just one of the Pages is one of the several different apps or software that you could use to digitally annotate, and we'll talk more about that as the class progresses. But let's go ahead and get started with this one. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the top right here, and I'm going to go to Smart Annotation, and I can choose my favorite color here, or in this case, I'll just choose one color. You could also, another option is, as you get really good at annotating, you could use different color options for the different things that you're writing. But today we'll just use blue, and I'm going to get started now. The first thing that I always look at is the title. I've underlined that at the top. The title is Ain't I a Woman? Now, I don't think Truth actually titled this speech. I think this was almost like an impromptu speech. To some degree, and as you read it, you can see what I mean by that. So I don't think she actually titled it Ain't a Woman. I think the title itself comes from the repetition, and you can see a couple instances of that in the speech. So she says this phrase over and over again. So for now, though, we'll consider it the title, and the thing that stands out, obviously, is her use of informal and actually, especially for that time, incorrect grammar. This is strange because, especially for this time, an African American who is speaking to a largely white audience, you think someone like Frederick Douglass at the time, who was really an eloquent speaker, and he would use his amazing speaking and writing abilities to impress his white audience whenever he would speak. And here you see Sojourner Truth doing what seems like almost the opposite. And she was very well educated, so it really stands out that she's choosing to use this vernacular language, right? This vernacular meaning informal and kind of, the way that you might speak to a friend. So we see this a few times in the opening paragraph. Twixt could be something. So much racket is another informal one. She's talking in the last or second to last sentence. The white men will be in a fix pretty soon. That's a way of saying, they're going to be upset. So we see another one, maybe out of kilter. All of these examples we could consider as truth using vernacular. So the question there is why? Why would she use such informal language, knowing that as soon as she stands up, the entire audience, which is pretty much all white, is judging her and probably bringing a lot of inherent bias to their opinion of her. So she's she has to climb this uphill battle of trying to prove that she's intelligent enough to speak in front of this white audience, and instead of going, using the $10 words, she's using improper grammar, and she's using all this vernacular in her opening speech. So that's one thing that immediately stands out, and that's tied to the title. Another thing that I'm going to highlight here, and I'll just do it with a different color because I'm bored, is the word children. It's the second word she uses, and when I think of children, and she's calling her audience here children. Now, she might be older than most of her audience. If I'm not mistaken, she is at an old age when she delivers this speech. But clearly, these are not children in the audience, right? This is a women's convention. And we know from the second paragraph that it's not just women too, right? There's men in the audience as well. But by calling them all children, she's taking on kind of a motherly persona or a motherly tone in a way, and I'll talk a little bit about why she might want to do that. The other thing that we'll kind of point out here, whenever I'm reading the first paragraph, I'm always looking for insight into what this speech is going to be about. And so I'm going to just underline that part right there. She says that there's these Negroes in the South and there's women at the North, and they're all talking about rights. And so combining that with the fact that this is a women's convention and the fact that it's 1851, I can infer that this speech is going to be about women rights or civil rights to some extent. So I'll go ahead and kind of make that assumption. I'll put a question mark because I'm still not 100% sure. But yeah, what I've done so far in this first paragraph is I've identified what is probably going to be the topic. And as I read, I will make sure that my inference was correct or perhaps incorrect. I've also identified an interesting language feature of this first paragraph, which is her use of vernacular. And then I did some close reading and I picked out just one word to consider. So those are all my thoughts in the first paragraph. Now, as they appear on the page now, if someone who didn't understand my thought process as they look at that, they would be really confused with all this annotation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click done there, and I'm going to use another feature here. Let's see. I'm going to try to just get children there. Good. So I've highlighted children, and what I can do using pages is now I could actually type a comment about that. So I talked about how children makes truth seem motherly. And so now I'm going to add some more thoughts to that. These would be the type of thoughts that you might actually post in what we're going to call our AP blog. I'm going to ask you guys to be, whenever you read something, I'm going to ask you to respond to your reading by writing down some of your better thoughts on a particular passage. And so what I have here, what I'm doing, these aren't, fleshed out thoughts. It's incomplete sentences, but at least it'll allow me to, put my thoughts down, and then I can come back later if I want to and see these kind of typed out longer thoughts and put them into complete sentences or coherent arguments or whatever is required of me. So right now I have that using the word children seems motherly. So the next thing I want to add here is just some thoughts on why. Maybe why does she want to seem motherly to this audience? So what is it when we think of mothers? What's the connotation of mothers? So when I think of mothers, I think of caring. I think of having best interest in mind. I think of love, right? So these are all the things that would be going through the audience's mind, perhaps. And all of it would happen subconsciously. But when some old lady calls you her child, it's usually warm feelings like these that would maybe come to fruition in the deep recesses of your brain. So I'm going to click done right there. I'm going to click out of that box. And now if I click on that again, those words would pop up. So I'm going to do another thing here. I'm going to, there we go. I'm going to highlight a little bit more, and I'll highlight that passage. And the reason I'm highlighting that is those 4 different informal phrases are all included in there. So again, I'll click on comment, and now I want to think through, why would she choose informal vernacular? And so I talked a little bit about how this seems strange. Let's see, where's my comma there? Why not impress her audience with big words? And that's the essential question that I'm trying to ponder now. And it's up to me as a critical reader to at least attempt to answer this question. And my attempt might prove to be fruitless. It might not be any good at all, but at least I'm attempting that. So I think it's somewhat connected to this idea of her using the word children as well. And I'm going to write down that she is disarming her audience to some degree. And so if you think about, a typical audience here, one, it's going to be almost all white, and we know that there's men here too, and we know that she's about to challenge the opinion, particularly of the white men in the audience, but really of all the people in the audience, because the women's rights movement at this time didn't really include civil rights. So she's about to challenge them to a large degree, and we see that when she talks about how the white men will be in a fix pretty soon. But in her attempt to challenge them, she does not want to seem threatening. And I'm going to type that out. And that's why, again, she maybe chose to use that word, children. So she's approaching her audience in a very informal way. She's choosing not to use big words. And so in the audience's mind, not only is she motherly, but she's not at this moment an intellectual threat. Now, this will soon change as she gets to some of the other parts of her speech, which we'll see are very threatening to some degree. But again, when you think about opening paragraph and what she's trying to do here, she's not offering any arguments. She's really just kind of introducing a topic and then providing a voice to the topic. And at least at the beginning, it seems that her intention is to try to get the audience to let their guards down a little bit and to consider what she's saying, almost like from an old wise grandmother point of view. Of course, we're going to listen to her. That never seems like it's a threatening proposition. So anyway, those are my initial thoughts. I have two thoughts there that I can come back to later. And if Mr. McLeod asks me to write 5 thoughtful observations on something I'm reading, I know that I have 2 already for the first paragraph, and I'm sure I could get a bunch more in the next paragraphs. So anyway, those are just some of my initial thoughts, and hopefully I've highlighted how you could annotate, the different ways to annotate, and how those annotations are connected to other homework assignments. Thanks for listening.